Okay, so let's just imagine this for a second. You're in a serious situation, maybe an accident, major surgery, could be anything.
Hmm.
And suddenly the most critical thing you need is blood, a transfusion. But, you know, our current system, it's all based on donations, right? And it constantly hits these big walls, things like matching blood types, the fact that it doesn't last very long, and just chronic shortages everywhere, really. It's a huge global challenge. And that leads us right into the materials you sent over, some articles, research. Looks like a really major medical development.
Yeah, absolutely. So for this deep dive, we're really going to unpack these sources, try to understand what they're describing, which is, well, essentially universal artificial blood developed in Japan.
Right. And it feels like big news because, I mean, the research you share suggests it hits those exact problems we mentioned: compatibility, supply, storage.
Exactly. The things that have always limited traditional blood transfusions, it's potentially huge.
Given how long scientists have
Yeah.
been trying to crack this, feels pretty significant.
Oh, it really does. If you look back, and some of these sources touch on the history, artificial blood has been this kind of holy grail for ages. People have tried for centuries, but making something that works like blood and is safe and stable, incredibly tough. Even, after Landsteiner figured out blood types way back in 1901, which made transfusions safer, we were still stuck with donated blood limits, matching, keeping it cold, just never having quite enough.
Right. That 42-day shelf life needs constant refrigeration. It's a logistical puzzle. And there's always that tiny theoretical risk of transmission, despite testing. The sources you sent make it clear that earlier attempts, things like HBOCs or PFCs, they ran into big trouble, toxicity, or they just didn't quite work right in the body. So what's different here? What did the Nara Medical University team do, according to this research that seems to have worked?
Well, that's where the novelty really lies, based on these papers. The team, led by Professor Hiromi Sakai, they start with hemoglobin, the protein that carries oxygen. They get it from expired donated blood. But the key step, the really crucial part highlighted, is encapsulating it.
Encapsulated. Okay, what does that mean exactly? How does that work? Based on what you read, how does that get around those old problems?
So they basically package the hemoglobin molecules inside these tiny lipid vesicles. You can think of them as like microscopic artificial bubbles, almost like tiny artificial cells. And the research suggests that by doing this, they can process the hemoglobin first to get rid of the stuff that causes immune reactions, the blood type antigens specifically, and also any potential viruses or pathogens. So it's this processing and the encapsulation that seems to make it universally compatible. Anyone could receive it, regardless of blood type. And it's free from infection risk.
Okay, that encapsulation part sounds, like a really key piece for the universal compatibility angle. Makes sense. But what about storage? That's the other nightmare with donated blood, right? The cold chain logistics.
Ah, yes. And that might be the most, startling feature described in these sources, even beyond the compatibility. Unlike regular donated blood fridge, short shelf life, this artificial blood, can apparently be stored at room temperature for up to 2 years.
Wait, 2 years at room temperature.
That's what the sources report, yes.
Wow. I mean, that's a massive difference. Just think about what that means for, like, paramedics, field medics, disaster zones, having stable, universal blood ready to go anywhere, anytime, no fridge needed. That just completely changes emergency care logistics.
It really does. The sources mention it even has a unique purple-ish color because of the encapsulated hemoglobin, but functionally, it acts like blood.
Okay, so how did they test this? The development process described seems pretty careful.
Yeah, it seems methodical. They detail extensive preclinical work, lots of animal models, testing safety and effectiveness in simulated blood loss situations. Seems promising there.
And that led to human trials? I saw mentions of small trials starting back in 2022.
Yeah.
Healthy volunteers?
That's right. Small initial safety trials, minimal side effects, apparently temporary, and then a bigger trial kicked off more recently, March 2025.
Okay, bigger trial. What did that involve?
So this newer trial, according to sources, involved giving larger doses, somewhere between 100 and 400 milliliters, to 16 healthy adults. And this phase is really crucial, obviously, for checking safety with larger volumes, but also seeing how well it actually works in humans, delivering oxygen, helping with clotting, that sort of thing.
Okay, so kind of bringing this all together, what's the potential impact here, according to the materials? What can this mean down the line?
The potential is just vast, really. For trauma care, it could be revolutionary. Imagine first responders giving transfusions right there on the spot. No need to wait, no need to type blood first. Saves precious time.
Yeah, absolutely. And in hospitals, blood banks, being able to stockpile this for 2 years at room temp, that could dramatically cut down on shortage risks, especially during big emergencies or, seasonal lulls in donations.
Exactly. And think about rural areas or developing countries, places where keeping a diverse refrigerated blood supply is just incredibly hard. This could be transformative for access to care.
So the impact goes beyond just immediate transfusions.
Oh, definitely. The sources suggest the technology itself, especially this encapsulation method, could spark new ideas elsewhere. Synthetic biology, maybe regenerative medicine, even artificial organs down the road. It really makes you rethink the whole blood supply chain.
How are other scientists reacting? Is it just universal excitement based on the articles?
Well, it seems like a mix. Significant excitement, definitely, but tempered with that typical scientific caution. You know how it is with big breakthroughs. Experts quoted acknowledge it's a major step, but they also point out potential hurdles. Like, right now, it still relies on expired human blood for the hemoglobin.
Ah, right. So scalability could be an issue for global production.
Potentially, yeah. That might be a bottleneck, though some researchers are apparently already looking into fully synthetic hemoglobin sources to get around that.
Makes sense. And the public. Media coverage you saw.
Overwhelmingly positive, it seems. Understandably focused on the life-saving angle. And you can bet policymakers, global health groups, they're watching this very, very closely.
I imagine the regulatory side is complex too.
For sure, agencies are just starting to figure out how something like this fits in, how to ensure safety standards are super rigorous. The sources also kind of hint that this isn't the only lab working on this sort of thing. There's parallel research, like Professor Teruyuki Komatsu's work using albumin instead of lipids for encapsulation, suggests we might be entering a new era for blood substitutes.
So what's next for the Nara team specifically? The sources mentioned moving beyond healthy volunteers.
That's the critical next phase, yeah. They indicate plans for trials in actual patients, people experiencing acute blood loss trauma, surgery maybe, and potentially patients with chronic anemia, too.
And if those trials go well, what's the timeline look like, roughly?
If those patient trials are successful, the materials suggest widespread clinical use might potentially be feasible around 2030, give or take, obviously. They even talk about future uses in, like, extreme environments, space travel, complex military situations where regular blood just isn't practical.
So, connecting back to the big picture, this really does feel like it could be a pivotal moment, tackling those fundamental transfusion challenges we've had for, well, centuries.
It certainly feels that way. If we boil it down, the core achievement described in these sources is this. Japanese researchers seem to have created universally compatible, virus-free artificial blood, and crucially, it stores for 2 years at room temperature.
Which could just profoundly change trauma care, help with global shortages, boost access in remote places, and maybe even push other areas of science forward.
Yeah, it feels like a goal science has been chasing for a very, very long time might finally be within grasp.
Okay, so given all that scientific excitement and the huge potential impact we've talked about based on these sources, the potential to really change global healthcare, what do you think are the biggest hurdles outside the lab? Thinking beyond the science itself. Maybe challenges around making sure everyone benefits, distributing it equitably worldwide, or how it might change voluntary blood donation. What non-scientific issues need tackling before this technology can really deliver on its promise? Just something for you to consider.